Mental discipline theory. Mental discipline theory was the first major historical theory to provide a foundation for the field of education. And it's the idea that the mind is like a muscle. Things like memory, reason, attention, judgment, and even imagination can, with the right amount of exercise, grow and eventually operate automatically. For example, if someone's memory is improved through the memorization of a long passage, then memorizing other things, such as dates or names, anything related to memory, becomes easier. In that same idea, skills should be developed from easiest to most complex. So, if someone wanted to go out and run 10 miles today with no training, that would be hard. But after training, you develop your muscles and you eventually can run that 10 miles. And that same idea, we're looking at the mind as a muscle. You can train your mind to learn skills. You're not going to write a 10-page paper after having never written, but learning the steps and memorizing these steps can get you to the point of being able to write that paper. So this idea is traced back to ancient Greece and originally Plato and Aristotle. So right now we'll take a look at the three most famous philosophers. It's hard to look at Plato and Aristotle without first mentioning Socrates. Socrates encouraged students to think by using questioning. He spent a lot of time going around Athens and asking, what is wisdom, or what is beauty? And when someone would answer him, he would respond with a question. This was his way of teaching them to think better, as he would say. He used questioning to not only draw individual answers to that question, but really to encourage insight into the issue at hand. He didn't claim to know anything, and what he wanted to do was to expose ignorance in others and encourage people to always question these ideas and theories. At the time that he lived, he saw Athens at a great power, and then he also saw their defeat by Sparta. So the idea of a democracy was in question a little bit at the time, and because of his constant questioning of authority, questioning things like what is justice and what is democracy, and this was seen as possibly an attempt to bring down the democracy. So he was eventually sentenced to death for corrupting the youth, and he drank poison and died in the year 399 BC. He didn't leave any writings himself, but one of the biggest ideas that he left for was the Socratic method, and it was the same concept of admitting ignorance and admitting that you do not know everything, and continuing to question and forming opinions and discussing these things with other people and questioning other people's opinions. So he left us these ideas mostly through his student Plato. Plato recorded most of his teachings, and Plato is known mostly for two big things. First, founding the Academy, which is known as our first institution of higher learning in the Western world. And secondly, he wrote dialogues, many dialogues, and some of the themes included things like philosophy, logic, and ethics. And these dialogues really looked at how the world works. Through his teachings and the teachings of Socrates, people began to look at the world differently and question the world, bringing in things like logic and theory. So Plato's dialogues raised the right questions, and from this helped identify important ideas relevant to their answers. This helped his students, in a way, train their brain. So his continuous questioning was helping their students develop the brain and train the brain to, when they're faced with a problem, always question and find the answer. His most famous student was Aristotle. Aristotle went on to be a teacher of Alexander the Great, and he really developed this idea of logic, and logic as a field of study. He devised a system of classification used in biology, and also classified different governments. He saw governments as being good compared to governments as being bad, and what each of those represented. These are things that we still use when we classify governments today. So, in the end, there are a few activities that I shared with you. First, there's a link to a Socratic seminar. Just like Socrates encouraged questioning, a very popular method to use in the classroom is Socratic seminar. This is using questioning to not only look at what that answer should be, but to analyze and interpret documents. This is often used with poetry, or it can be used with looking at novels, oftentimes. So the first link includes some tips on how to set up. Is an article titled "You Can Grow Your Intelligence," and it's a short, easy read, which I've used with my students at the beginning of the class, beginning of the year, and it really focuses on a lot of these theories that Plato introduced, and it includes looking at your brain as a muscle, and that homework and classwork and these things are practice, and we develop our brains through practice. And so it's important that we realize we're not going to know everything right away, but we practice, and that's how we learn. And this idea that started way back in ancient Greece can still be applied to our classroom today. So, in review, the mental discipline theory was the first major theory in education, originating back to ancient Greece with Plato and Aristotle, and really influenced by the questioning of Socrates and the change of thought at this time from just listening to what is told to questioning and developing the practice of answering questions using logic. The idea behind mental discipline theory is that the brain is like a muscle that we can grow through practice and exercise. Now, this theory of memorization and rote memorization has been really disproven by a lot of theorists and scientists over time. But the idea that practicing skills and skills should be developed from easiest to more complex, and developing routines in questioning is something that can continue and will continue in education.